Okay, next up on the Aurora 9 is the governor menu. Okay, the governor menu works very much like the gyro menu in how it works. I just did a video on Governors 101 that explained how the channel controls RPM on a governor. Alright, you might want to refer to that if some of this isn't making sense to you. Anyway, we have to activate the menu. Now, once again, like the gyro menu, you'll notice there's a combine and separate, okay? So, if you want to tie your governor RPMs to your idle up switch, where you say this could be 1800, 1900, 2000, then you would want to separate these. So I'd separate normal, and I'd go into idle up and I'd separate that. I'd order idle up 2 and I'd separate that. Okay? So that is one way of doing it. Now, when you do it this way, and we're not going to go into the setting a switch yet, then you can set a rate, and only rate 1 shows up. All right, but let me show you how that works. Now, by the way, there's also unit. If you watch my Governors 101, I talk about the values in the channel that set the RPM. On this one, when it's rate, 50% is center of the channel, which means the governor will be off or no RPM. 0 is all the way one way, all right? And obviously 100 is all the way the other way in the channel. And actually this goes to 110. Anyway, so 50 means 0. You're center of the channel. Most governors, as I explained in that 101 video, will have a 0 RPM setting and not do anything. So now, again, in the 101 video, I talk about tacking your head and setting a value to the head speed you want. So in this example, let's just say that 76 gives me about 1800. All right? So I adjust this number using the tack until I see the head speed that I want. Let's say I want 1800, and this is the value that gives me 1800 on a governor. Now what I do is I go in and I flip the switch to idle up 1. Well, look, it went back to 0. So I'm going to set now... Now I'm going to set a value of, say, 82, and that gives me 1900, all right? Or 81, I don't care, it doesn't matter. And so I tack my head, I get to 1900, I adjust this value until the tack says 1900. Now I'm going to go into idle up 2. Remember, we'd already set up those idle ups, and I separated them all now. So now let's say this is, say, 86 for 2000, all right? So pretty straightforward. Most governors, you need a tack to set, and you need to find what this number is because it's really arbitrary. So there we go. There's my 76. That gives me 1800, let's say. This is 82. That gives me 1900 and 2000. All right, so that's how I get 3 RPMs tied to the idle up switch. Okay, so again, you got to separate the conditions, etc., etc., etc. Now, you could, if you wanted to, forget all that, and let's just combine all these again. All right, and we'll just reset, we already reset because they're combined. Okay, you could say, well, you know, I don't want RPMs tied to my idle up switch. I want a separate switch. All right, so you could use a 3 position or a 2 position. If you use a 2 position, you only get rate 1 and rate 2. If you use a 3 position, you'll get 3 different RPMs. So let's go in and do that. We're going to go into switch. We're going to select, and I'm going to pick the switch C, which is a 3 position, just to show you the 3 positions. We're going to back out. Now, on this one, it doesn't give you a choice of what's on or off or anything. And we're going to back out again. So now you see I've got 3 rates. Right? They're not tied to the condition switch. They'll now be tied to switch C, and you see a little arrow move as I flip switch C. All right, so now I can set my rates here. So remember the numbers I had before? You know, I'm not going to try and get accurate here, but you know, let's say I had 76, and then I come down here and I make this 82. All right, and I come here and this is, say, 87. All right, again, I used my tack to determine those numbers. So now when I flip this switch, I can change RPM, and I can be in any mode I want. All right? Now, you can get really bizarre, just like the gyro menu. I could separate these again. All right? So that they're all separated. Now watch. So now, since they were combined, I could be in normal mode. So in other words, I can get three RPMs off of here, plus 3 RPMs tied to my idle up switch, just like I did with the gyro menu. So let's reset all this. All right, so let's say in normal mode I want, say, 1700, and this is some arbitrary number, and I'm just gonna spend a whole bunch of time here, and this is a little bit larger, and this is a little bit larger. All right, so now I've got those 3 rates that are controlled by this switch. But when I go from now, and I set these in normal mode, when I go into idle 1, notice they all went back to my previous number, so we'll reset those again. All right, so now there's my normal mode RPMs based on this switch, and I can go into idle 1, and I can set numbers here. So if you wanted to, you could have normal being, say, 1700, 1750, 1800. Then when you go into idle up 1, it could be 1800, 1850, 1900. And then when I go into idle 2, it could be, 1900 or 1950, 2000, 2100 or something. All right? Just by setting 3 rates in 3 of the different conditions. I hope that's making sense. All right, so now we're going to go into the last thing that you can do, and that is when we went in here, you notice there was the adjust function. You can assign a trimmer to an adjust function. So we're going to set, and let's just pick, in this case, let me select LT, all right? I'm going to go back here, and let's just leave this at a 30% trim. So when I move this, all right, it will change the RPM select line with a trimmer in relation to the values that I have set here. So I'm in normal, switches up, and we're going to now go to the servo monitor so you can see this. And as you'll see, there is channel 7. That is my RPM select line. As I flip into idle up, you see the number go up. All right, and also my other switch control stuff, as you see. But now, watch as I use the trimmer. So let's say I'm in normal and I'd set my value in the governor menu, and let's say it was 1880 instead of 1900. You could, with the trimmer, go ahead and adjust it, and then wait till it comes back or hit the exit, and you'll see the channel has changed. I lowered it in that case. Had I moved LT up, it would have raised it. All right, so makes sense. You can actually have a trimmer to trim your RPM slightly, all right, on your governor. So very powerful in the governor menu, all kinds of features. Now, one thing I would like to talk about in the governor menu is, let me just reset this stuff and combine all this. All right, and we're going to go back in here, and I'm going to turn off the switch because I don't want it for now, just for this demonstration. All right, so we've got our 1 rate. So now let's talk about the fact that in units, I brought this up a minute ago, most governors, this is what you're going to want to use because you need attack anyway. There's also this thing called RPM. Now, RPM will only work, in other words, this will not, don't think this will give you your true RPM. Some governors, it's arbitrary where in the channel you are, what your RPM is, because it's based on your gear ratio. Helis have different gear ratios. There's no possible way for this radio to know what your gear ratio is. So by just going in here and setting to say 1700 or 1800, all right, now which I will, this does not mean you're going to get 1800 out of your heli. This has no clue what your RPM is. However, if you use a multi-gov, it's called a multi-gov Pro, you can set the software so 3 positions will be the RPM. So on the multi-gov, you use the programmer, see my multi-gov videos, and you can set 1800, say 1900, and say 2000 in there. Now the value, or the value here, really doesn't mean anything. It's a different value than another. So here you could use the RPM value. You could say, the radio's not really sending a signal to the governor saying run at 1800. But when you set up the multi-gov, you can now put these in here so that they are meaningful. All right, so I'm going to separate. So in normal, I've got this. In idle 1, I could have, say, 1900. You know what I mean? And then in idle up 2, I could have, all right, 2030. All right, again, most governors, this means squat. But to the multi-gov, you could set it up so it actually does this. So you got 1800, 1900, and 2300. But let's look at the servo monitor on what that means, because this will be interesting. If you'll notice now in the servo monitor, it just gives these 3 positions here. All right, it's just a change. You can't, changing that RPM value will move this in the channel, but what the multi-gov is looking for is simply a change, all right, or 3 different positions. So in this case, on a multi-gov, you could use the RPM value instead of the rate, instead of the unit. All right, but most governors, you have a line governor, Curtis governor, Throttle Jockey Pro, Rev Max, 7100R, etc. go ahead and use this value because you're going to need a tach to set the head speed. There's no possible way the radio would know 1800 and what signal it's sending to the governor that you'll get 1800. So do not think this automatically knows. It's not possible. All right, maybe with the telemetry add-on later, there's something that this can be used for. I don't know. I don't have the telemetry system yet. All right, so that's basically the governor menu.